Well, thank you, and good afternoon. As was just mentioned, I'm Vern Ohlman, a recently retired founding architect of the Grand Rapids architectural and engineering firm known as Design Plus. In 1970, while apprenticing at another firm, I began my design career and my involvement with Grand Valley as a member of the design team for what is now the Kirchhoff Center. Several years later, after having formed and grown this new A&E firm, Grand Valley invited us to interview for the work of helping the university plan, design, and build for what became an era of rapid growth. We were hired, and I remained involved for nearly 25 years. The word campus carries highly positive associations. We think of leafy public commons dotted with handsome buildings, alive with the energy of students engaged in invigorating discussions. College grads looking back happily at their years on campus, remembering not just classes and friends, but the physical surroundings with a deep fondness. A quote from Winston Churchill says, "We shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us," which suggests there is a direct link between our built environment and the behavior within it. Educational environments are the most powerful when they offer students, faculty, and staff three fundamental conditions. 1, a sense of security and inclusion. 2, mechanisms for involvement. And 3, an experience of community. A village community with strong public spaces brings people together by providing opportunities for synergies to naturally occur. Admissions departments realize that a lively, welcoming campus makes a good impression on freshmen, parents, alumni, and potential benefactors coming back for a visit. In the careers of perhaps a relatively few architects, the stars align and an exceptional opportunity comes along to provide the leadership for a major project of significant influence. For me, that happened with the expansion of Grand Valley's downtown campus. Through the generosity of the Robert Pugh Foundation and others, and at that time, Grand Valley's resident visionary, President Lubbers, created the opportunity to expand this urban campus utilizing the humane characteristics of a small European village, one akin to the universities of Oxford and Cambridge in England. In the early discussions of its planning, President Lubbers intuitively talked about a community of learners within this village concept. Quote, "Students deserve nothing less than an educational environment that is affirming, energizing, challenging, and productive. It needed to be a welcoming, safe, memorable, and handsome place. It needed to be supportive, a place that respected the values of all that come, a place where you want to be rather than a place where you have to be." So here's what we did. 1, on a trip through this village of learners in the urban setting of downtown Grand Rapids, you'll experience a sense of enclosure, intimacy, and protection as the arrangement of low-rise buildings defines a variety of outdoor rooms. Here, brick walls block winter winds and focus summer breezes. Heavily leafed trees shade you in summer, and leafless trees allow the sun to warm you in winter. These outdoor rooms and narrow pathways with their lighting and windows and doors looking into them provide a feeling of security. It is easy to see and be seen, providing a sense of safety through recognition. 2, what distinguishes this place is the hierarchy and importance of these outdoor rooms. Like most village commons and small-town courthouse squares, these spaces are the civic focus for a neighborhood. They are located in prominent places, surrounded by common-use facilities. Adjacent buildings, while never more than 5 stories and mostly 2 and 3 stories, vary in character to help delineate various academic functions. The The outdoor rooms are then places where academic function, The outdoor rooms are then places where just seeing them brings a sense of orientation and calm to the soul. They become places that provide opportunities to meet or rest and reflect. Aided by the relaxing sound of splashing water in a fountain and at times the crisp, clean sound of carillon bells. 3, at the campus front door, building facades set the tone of quality and build a sense of intrigue and expectation. Richly detailed facades bring to life the memorable character and personality of the place. The intent of these facades is to bridge time and create a sense of stability, credibility, and timelessness for the university. Here, living on campus means a lot of people around at all times, helping the campus feel alive and safe. The net effect of this learning village is it is where students learn to interact with others while finding their role or place in the world order. 4, like Thomas Jefferson's famous live, work, play academic village at the University of Virginia, the Q campus was built to emulate life in the community at large. Jefferson wanted to grow the understanding of living in a democracy through an academic village experience. Today, within this university village environment, our great experiment in democracy continues to evolve. Here on the Allendale campus are 5 definable villages, beginning with the academic village with the Kirchhoff Center as its hub, North Campus with Kleiner Commons as its hub, and South Campus with Connections as its hub, with a village neighborhood community known as the Honors College. At the campus's west boundary, 2 private student housing developers have also provided student housing with a small commercial center as their hub, creating 2 more neighborhood of learners. The importance of common interests, values, and experiences in the learning community underscores the role of identity and affiliation in students' lives. Individuals seek educational experiences in order to explore dimensions of self. Questions such as, who am I? What can I do? And where are we going? All come together in a state of transition as decisions are contemplated for the next phases of their lives. The neighborhood experience for students serves to support 7 important life experiences. 1, a sense of group identity where everyone recognizes one another as learners while valuing the contribution of each individual. 2, opportunities for learners to come together to meet and engage in transformative learning. 3, an environment that engages new students in the life and culture of the institution. 4, a seamless experience that integrates both social and academic activities. 5, connections among disciplines, recognizing that although ways of knowing may be discipline-specific, knowledge and concepts are not. 6, an environment that helps develop complex thinking skills through activities designed to ask the student to interact with people and material at a much deeper level than simply receiving information. And 7, a learning environment that is continually evolving as new members enter and evaluate process and outcomes. Experiencing a village or community of learners at this time in one's life affirms and supports the emergence of a sense of identity, which is one of the most powerful and consistent outcomes of the learning process. Every campus has a design, even if the administration, faculty, and students have not planned it or are not consciously aware of it. Still, successful campus design depends on the input from all campus members, including students, faculty, staff, administration, and trustees. Universities are complex, excuse me. Universities are complex environments and require strong, experienced leadership at their helm. With a 35-year history with Grand Valley, Ron VanSteeland, Vice President Emeritus, led us through the blind spots, pitfalls, and complexities of Grand Valley to design and build university campuses that, when visited by new students and parents, their reaction is that the real Grand Valley actually exceeds its own marketing propaganda. Its physical environment tells the truth. Ron will share with you some additional details and insights about the challenges we faced.
I think Vern has clearly demonstrated that campus and building design clearly influence our feelings, our thoughts, and even our behavior. Creatively designed interior and exterior spaces can foster interaction between people, provide motivational spaces for reading, logging onto the internet, reading email, studying, contemplation, having fun, and even enjoying the arts. Today, I'd like to mention several design considerations that were prevalent in our thinking as we planned our campuses and designed our new buildings. First, we decided to identify the center of campus and place an appropriate building or structure in that location. In the case of both the downtown campus and the Allendale campus, we were able to use a carillon tower to designate and symbolize the center of each campus. This is not easy to do in a state-supported building project. You have to have donors who will pay 100% of the cost of these additional features. Second, we appreciated the fact that European cities and towns almost always strategically place cathedrals and other majestic buildings at the end of the most important streets. Here in the United States, though, we don't seem to care about these vistas, and we even put ugly parking ramps at the end of our most important main streets. We believe that this should be a conscious design decision by our planning teams. At the U-shaped DeVos Center downtown, we used a tunnel through the building to reveal the historic Blue Bridge link to the east side of the Grand River and the downtown area. Here in Allendale, we placed a tunnel between Padnos Hall of Science and Student Services to reveal the Cook Carillon Tower when you drive into the campus from the north. Take a look the next time you drive into campus, look through the tunnel and see if you can see the Carillon Tower at the end. Third, building exteriors and the outdoor areas between buildings are critical to the overall feeling you have of the campus. Here are some examples. We used pocket gardens, green spaces, and ravine edges, fountains, and outdoor seating areas to create a warm and positive impression of the campus. Vern always counseled us to pay close attention to the quality of the front door and the front entry of the buildings, because that establishes our first impression of a building. We tried to hide the large, ugly transformers and cable boxes, or at least to put them next to the back doors of the buildings. For some reason, engineers and other technical people would always try to place these ugly intrusions right next to an otherwise attractive front door. Hiding the back door of buildings should always be a priority. I'll bet most people don't know where the back door of DeVos Center downtown is because they've never seen it. Hiding back doors or service entrances isn't easy to do, but it's worth it if you can do it. Convenient parking is critical to all of our constituents. That doesn't mean, though, that parking lots are beautiful. In fact, they generally detract from an otherwise beautiful setting. The lots can be placed in the least offensive location visually and should be screened with trees and shrubbery whenever possible. It's harder to do this in downtown Grand Rapids, but we tried to use brick walls and metal fencing to partially screen the parking areas. Fourth, we embraced the idea that small things can make a big difference. One seldom mentioned example is that we always tried to install more stalls and women's restrooms than the Michigan Building Code requires, especially in areas where there are large public events. I'll bet you didn't know that. Another example is to think about and create special spaces inside the buildings which facilitate and encourage conversation, such as locating lounges near food service, corridor window seats at DeVos Center downtown, breakout spaces for students to work on team projects, like the area on the west end of the plaza at DeVos Center. We also learned that if you want to encourage people to use the stairs rather than the elevators, it's smart to make the entrance to make the staircase to the second floor visible from the front entrance when you walk in. Another interesting design feature was the use of locally created stained glass windows in the steel-cased library. These help to establish a contemplative atmosphere. Fifth, our experience over time taught us to assume that our successors will want to add on to most buildings at some point in the future. It is very wise to plan from the very beginning just how that might be done and to commit those ideas to writing for our successors. Building infrastructures and utilities can be planned with future expansion in mind without detracting from the project as it looks today. Sixth, we learned to be very careful about assuming that the initial occupants of a new building would be the permanent occupants. Circumstances change over time for all academic and support departments, and they may move to a different building at some point in the future. A perfect example is the Seidman School of Business, which was the single largest and most important occupant of DeVos Center when we opened it in the year 2000. Now, only 10 years later, 10 and a half years later, a new building is being planned for them downtown. So, we tried to avoid planning office areas and office spaces that were unique to the departments that were initially going to occupy the building, if that uniqueness, in fact, might have a serious cost implication for future occupants of that same area. After all, remodeling funds come directly from the university's budget. There are no state support for remodeling and renovation. We always made exceptions, though, for science labs and art studios and other specialized spaces which had to meet specific needs of the first occupants of the facility. Seventh, incorporating state-of-the-art technology can be very tricky. We want it to be appropriate and contemporary when the building opens, but we also know that the situation will change dramatically in 10 or 20 years. Just imagine the problems of retrofitting the 1,000-year-old buildings at Oxford University repeatedly over the centuries to accommodate running water, indoor toilets, electricity, computing technology, and communications which didn't exist when the building was built. Some of these modifications were necessary hundreds of times during the life of the buildings. More will occur in the future. Yet when you look at these beautiful structures, particularly Oxford and Cambridge, which really impressed me, when you look at them on either the outside or the inside, one can only marvel at how versatile they were over more than 1,000 years. We can only hope that our willingness to think about this while we were designing our Grand Valley buildings will give them a long and flexible life. Eighth, incorporating art into the project is a win-win for everyone. Our newer buildings house much of the university's art collection, and doing so really gives us a chance to show off faculty and student art. We are very fortunate at Grand Valley to have an enthusiastic contributor to our projects in Henry Matthews, the Director of Galleries and Collections. Number 9, safety issues must be evaluated for every project. Some examples of our thinking include using large windows on the first floor of buildings and the entrance areas to add light to outdoor areas so that people feel safe after dark. Second, keeping pedestrian areas visible to security and others from a distance for nighttime safety. And finally, placing restroom entrances in such a way that the inside has visual privacy, but that they do not need to have doors on them. People feel much safer in spaces which are not totally enclosed. 10th, we knew from the very beginning that the Pew campus downtown was going to be very important to the development and character of the West Side. The economic impact of a campus on the surrounding core of the city was always obvious, but we also wanted to be sure that we were responsible leaders in setting a standard of quality that would challenge developers who would follow us. So often, commercial developers tend to concentrate on short-term profits, and they don't concern themselves with long-term impacts of their projects. Fortunately, universities can do just the opposite and design for future generations. During the planning for our campus downtown, we always had a very strong relationship with planning and economic development officials from the city of Grand Rapids. They knew very well the potential impact of our new campus and worked with us to make it happen. The Blue Bridge, which connects our campus to the east side of the river and the central core of the city, is a good example of this foresight. While we were constructing the Eberhard Center in the mid-1980s, there were plans under consideration by the city to tear the abandoned bridge down because it was perceived as a bridge to nowhere. Where have we heard that recently? A bridge to nowhere. We strongly urged the city to rehabilitate the bridge and, in fact, at a particular point in time, even to paint it blue. And if you've noticed in the Grand Rapids Press in a couple of weeks, there have been some stories about that. And finally, we tried to make sure that buildings are maintainable both inside and out. Clean buildings and well cared for exteriors leave a positive first impression. Clean buildings and grounds also encourage people to be good stewards and to pick up after themselves. Next, we'd like to talk about the planning team for each project. Many of them are here in the audience today for various projects. We always tried to be very deliberate about who became members of the planning team. The team always consisted of architects, engineers, and sometimes even the general contractor. But the Grand Valley representatives I want to talk about. We always appointed representatives such as administrators, faculty, staff, and sometimes even students from the departments which will occupy the facility. We tried to find people who would have opinions and be willing to express them. It is important, too, that they be respected by others from the department, and of course, that they should be interested in and very concerned about and committed to the success of the project. It didn't matter to us whether or not they had any prior experience in designing buildings.
An important but often overlooked issue is the collective personality of the design team. Our experience has been that architects, engineers, as well as any other specialty consultants, are responsible for creating an open, honest, unintimidating, judgment-free, effective working environment. No hidden agendas allowed. The most helpful personality types are those with their egos under control, who avoid an arrogant attitude and who work to promote a considerate, respectful, collaborative team effort.
Of course, there are always disagreements about the goals for any project. The best way I know to identify those issues is to prepare something we called a program statement for the project. This usually includes a complete list of all the spaces which must be included in the building, such as offices, classrooms, lecture halls, labs, specialized spaces, and so on. But we wanted to be sure that we were aware of things like gathering spaces, food service, and so on. It is very important that disagreements about what the building will include be debated and resolved up front before the planning process begins. There are usually competing interests as well. Sometimes we ask members of the central administration or academic leadership to help to resolve these before we were too deep into the architectural planning. The project budget was always an issue. Everyone always wanted more than we could afford. We always tried to clarify the budget constraints and realities up front. In the latter days, there were almost always donors who would likely be involved in these discussions about our limitations. We all knew that the schedule for the completion of the project was inflexible. It was almost never practical to open an academic building after fall semester begins, because moving faculty, staff, and students during an academic year is almost impossible. Therefore, it seemed to us like our target was always July or August of any given year, no matter how much time that gave us to construct the project.
As Ron has mentioned, missed construction budgets and schedules create havoc for everyone. We learned early on that we needed to modify the traditional design bid build process. We knew we needed to involve well-experienced contractors during the final design phase to take on the responsibility of advising the design team on the cost of building systems and their impact on construction timing. Except for a few close calls, we maintained a reputation for being on time and on budget. It worked because we then had the cost and schedule, had the opportunity to balance issues of design in light of cost and schedule, thereby avoiding having to make costly design changes late in the construction process. This approach saved time and money while meeting the project's quality goals.
We always tried to prepare the members of the planning team for their participation by traveling to other facilities, especially campuses, to see contemporary buildings. For the DeVos Center project, we visited Washington, D.C. to see some spectacular traditional architecture. We went to Toronto to see the Movenpick Marché, a unique underground multi-purpose people space. We went to Georgetown, near D.C., to see Dumbarton Oaks for outdoor rooms. And we went to Alexandria, Virginia, to see a parking ramp which had been totally disguised inside row housing. And finally, we went to the University of Michigan to see their new engineering building at the time because of some wonderful student gathering spaces they had included in that project. Because the Seidman School of Business would be the primary occupant of the new DeVos Center downtown, we also collectively visited a total of 14 newer schools of business across the country and 2 in England. We wanted to be sure that we knew what the state of the art is for these types of facilities.
I believe every project needs to begin with a significant research effort to enable both the designers and the end users to fully understand and agree on the project's wants, needs, and circumstances. Ron instituted one of the most effective methodologies for helping both designer and committee member to quickly develop critical thinking in regards to understanding and communicating the opportunities and variables facing them in the design of a new facility. A methodology of shared experiences. Shared experiences quickly bring committee members and professionals to a deepened level of common understandings and a common vocabulary to communicate impressions, feelings, criticisms, needs, hopes, fears, and most importantly, new ideas. New ideas that tend to stimulate innovation and creativity are not the exclusive domain of the professionals. In fact, logically, those who have struggled hardest with the project issues will intuitively come up with the best ideas. Ron saw to it that each committee toured several existing, new, old, and analogous projects. At the end of the day, or social time, the conversations were intense, stimulating, and just plain fun. By the time the tours ended, the committee and the design professionals were communicating at a level worthy of those who had been through a war together. Their respect for each other's opinions and ideas facilitated the formation of a rock-solid program of project goals.
Well, I know that some of you who were on those project planning teams will remember that some of our best meetings actually occurred in the bars or cocktail lounges which were across the street from the venues we were visiting, because we could always... I shouldn't be telling everything, but we had some of our best discussions and arguments in those venues because it was fresh in our minds, and we learned to talk to each other about what we liked and what we didn't like. We also needed to make sure that the architects and other advisors were responsive. In order to keep the intensity of the planning effort up, we almost always met at least weekly, and we expected all committee members to attend unless they had an excuse in writing from their mother. Next, we want to talk further about the importance of having a vision for a project before the planning actually begins. I want to tell you a story about the early planning for DeVos Center, the project which is on the screen. In the very early days, in the mid-'80s, while we were doing preliminary planning for the project, Eberhard Center was our only building in Grand Rapids. Programs were expanding rapidly, and it was critical to add more facilities. Former board member and Steelcase chairman Robert Pugh had arranged for Steelcase to donate to Grand Valley the old Stowe and Davis Furniture Company land west of the 131 Expressway. It was literally falling apart, but a giant tract of land immediately west of 131. Then we spent a couple of years buying the adjacent industrial properties, including several abandoned sites. It was around 2004, and it was time to plan the campus expansion and begin fundraising for the massive project. At a preliminary meeting with some prospective donors, a very rough sketch was presented to them of this project, which depicted the expanded campus as a series of buildings which resembled 3 Eberhard centers connected by a walkway. The reaction from those assembled, most of them donors, was not very positive. After we reflected on the negative reaction we had received, President Lubbers came up with the idea that we use the concept of a European village for the buildings west of the expressway.
Fulton Street bisects the Pew campus from its east entry at the river's edge, west to the west entry at the railroad crossing. When you travel this road segment, you are immediately aware that you are now on a campus where pedestrians have priority. This 4-lane highway is divided by a tree-lined median with additional trees lining the wide pedestrian walks on both its north and south sides. At the campus midpoint is a crosswalk delineated by special paving, connecting students coming from their south campus housing to the academic north campus and the village square. By now, you will have noticed a circle of international flags surrounding a large fountain with cascading water and an adjacent Carillon Tower, which has now become the icon for the city's entire west side. By the time you reach the west entry, you will have been an eyewitness to a village of learners within the intense density of an urban downtown, where a nondescript city street became a great front door. As a pedestrian arriving at this same midpoint, you would have the opportunity to enter the heart of this learning community through its village square and beyond through the village green. By doing so, you would pass by a richly detailed executive meeting room called the Regency Room, with an enclosed garden that emulates the typical church and cemetery of a small European village. As you walk along, 1, 2, 3, and 5-story buildings surround you, all with richly detailed brick facades reflecting the human scale and humane characteristics of a handcrafted environment. When you arrive at the heart of this community, you will be at the village commons. This is the place to see and be seen. It's the village coffee house where you meet and greet others. This informal setting with food and drink and the campus store brings people together and ideas together. From here, it's a short walk to all academic areas as well as the primary east-west pedestrian walkway from the major parking areas across the Blue Bridge to the city's center. Here is where you realize that the U-shaped building arrangement, while providing a gracious campus front door at its open end, encloses and protects this town's citizenry from the distraction of a major elevated 8-lane expressway at its east side and a rail line to the west. At the point when the planning of this arrangement was being discussed, a well-traveled and insightful committee member by the name of Tom Walterink reacted to the purity of this very simple and straightforward U-shaped layout. He shared with us that to keep it interesting, he had lived his life about 11 degrees off center, and something needed to happen to recognize the imperfection of mankind and therefore accomplish more human interest to this layout. Once we all got back on our chairs, the designers and the fellow committee members agreed he was right. After a bit of discussion, we moved the library, the Carillon Tower, and the computer center 11 degrees off the north-south center line. And we all immediately agreed this was the creative suggestion that improved the quality and beauty of this campus tenfold. Tom, thank you for your insightful creativity, wisdom, and good humor.
A picture of the dream was almost always necessary for fundraising purposes and to communicate the project to various audiences. The one on the screen is the one we used at the beginning of the Pew Campus project. Donors and other opinion leaders should be able to say, wow, and experience a sense of excitement and have a great feeling about the project and its impact on the future of the university. Then it was our job to deliver the building which we had promised, on time and within budget. Only time will tell whether DeVos Center and the Pew Campus, and the Allendale campus for that matter, were successful in achieving our goals for future generations. Our intentions were good, though. Feedback so far has been very encouraging, both from design professionals and, more importantly, Grand Valley faculty, staff, students, and parents. I would love to be around in 50 or 100 years to see what faculty and students, who are not even born yet, think about the environment we and our successors created.
The future will be what it will be. Our efforts moved Grand Valley forward in its 50-year march to become the great leadership university it is today. And I thank you all for letting me be a part of it.